Elena Shockey from the Department of Public Utilities, Scott Sichler from the AEP Energy, and Scott Belcastor from Trebel LLC. Appreciate you all being here tonight and for preparing for this public hearing with the Public Utilities and Environment Committee of Columbus City Council. I also want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Remy, Chair of the Environment Committee, as well as members of the public for taking time this evening to tune in virtually to learn about the next steps for community aggregation here in Columbus. This is a follow-up hearing to one that we held back in July before AEP Energy was selected by the administration to be Columbus's supplier in this initiative. The purpose of this hearing is to learn why AEP Energy was chosen and to review and comment on the plan moving forward. City Council is committed to ensuring energy suppliers provide quality, reliable service, both for the energy generation and for customer service here in Columbus for our residents. This hearing is available to live stream on the CTV website, City Council's Facebook and YouTube channels. It's also being broadcast on Spectrum Channel 1024, WOW Channel 3, AT&T UVerse Channel 99. The video will also be posted on the City of Columbus YouTube channel following the events. The mayor is committed to reach 100% renewable energy in our city by the year 2022. I know I speak for my colleagues on City Council when we say we also share that goal. Tonight, we'll hear about some of the steps we must take to achieve this goal. We're also looking to gather feedback from our residents that are being asked to vote on this issue in the fast approaching general election. I now want to turn it over to my council colleague, Councilmember Remy, for his remarks. Councilmember Remy?
Thank you so much, Councilmember Dorans. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Again, I'm Councilmember Emmanuel Remy, and I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. This discussion is very important and a very important critical step to understanding the aggregation process. So I want to thank AEP Energy for joining us and providing this update this evening. I also want to take a moment of personal privilege and mention that I take great pleasure in the opportunity to hear from those who live, work, and raise their families here in the city of Columbus. So I'm looking forward to the public testimony. I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Dorans, for your leadership in getting us to this point. And I'd like to personally thank and recognize our presenters, Elena Shockey, our Assistant Director of Sustainability, Aaron Beck, the Director of Special Projects for the Office of the Mayor, Scott Slisher, for the Chief Solutions Officer for AEP Energy, and Scott Belcastor, the Principal with Trebel LLC. Finally, and very importantly, I want to thank those responsible for assisting with our technology needs, because that is what COVID is all about these days. And assure we get this information out to the Columbus community. So thanks to Angela Burks and Mark Carter and our entire CTV team for helping to put this on this evening. Councilmember Dorans, back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Remy, and just want to echo your comments for Angie and Mark keeping us running here tonight. We would not be able to do any of this without them, so appreciate both of them being here. I know in our last hearing, a lot of our discussion revolved around equity and how an aggregation program could impact the citizens of Columbus in an equitable way, both as it relates to climate change and economic development. And I think I'm very excited this evening to hear from the administration, from Trebel, and certainly AEP Energy about a lot of their plans to sort of meet not only our energy goal, but how do we get there? What are the details of the plan, and how does that impact citizens here in Columbus? So very excited for us to be able to have that kind of discussion here this evening. So with that, our first presenter this evening is Elena Shockey, who's the Assistant Director of Sustainability at the Department of Public Utilities. Elena, floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilmember Dorans. I am going to share my screen. Now you might see my email for a second. There we go. Oh. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Shockey. I'm the Assistant Director of Sustainability for the City of Columbus. Our brief agenda tonight before we move into the question and answer session.
We may be having a couple technical difficulties. If folks can bear with us for a moment.
I'm sorry, are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm not sure where I cut out. So good evening, everyone. My name is Elena. I'm the Assistant Director of Sustainability for the City of Columbus. Our brief agenda for tonight, I am beginning just to give you all a sense of the connection between our Sustainable Columbus climate goals and this community choice aggregation work. And then we'll turn it over to Aaron to give us a refresher and timeline for community choice aggregation before we really get into the meat of what everyone is here to hear tonight about Columbus's clean energy future and the next steps for community choice aggregation. So as many of you know, in February at the State of the City address, Mayor Ginther set an ambitious goal for our climate action plan. He announced that our goal is, for the City of Columbus is to be carbon neutral by 2050. And that serves as the North Star that we are now working from. And the two things that are critical to our climate action plan are to develop pathways to reach that carbon neutral by 2050, and also to demonstrate how we can adapt to some of the inevitable impacts of climate change that will happen in our community so that we can move from vulnerability to resilience. So how do we do that? How do we get to a place where we know what actions we need to take to meet our climate action goals? For us, it begins with knowing our data. Each year, we do community greenhouse gas inventories, which track our greenhouse gas emissions community-wide. And as you can see from this bar graph, we're able to break down our emissions by sector. So we're able to know what our emissions are from the residential energy, commercial energy, industrial energy, and we know, based on our emissions inventories, that 58% of the city's total community-wide emissions come from buildings. And we know even further that 24% come from residential energy, 31% from commercial energy, and 3% from industrial energy. We also know that we're also able to track how changes within these sectors are happening. So from 2013 to 2018, we know that emissions from the residential sector have grown 4.6%. And we know that emissions from the commercial energy sector have decreased by 26.8%. So that gives you a sense of where we know we need to focus our action in order to be successful in getting ourselves on a pathway to carbon neutral by 2050. We also know that we have a major challenge in the City of Columbus, which is also a great opportunity. The line that is on this bar graph shows us how population is growing within our city. And as population is growing, we also have to make absolute reductions in emissions to meet our carbon neutral goal. So that's a challenge, but it is a challenge that we are equipped to meet by focusing on a multifaceted plan. And as I mentioned, a critical piece of that plan is community choice aggregation. We need to transform the way that buildings generate, consume, and conserve energy. And when we're talking about generating energy, we're talking really about renewable energy. We're talking, and one of the critical levers in renewable energy is our community choice aggregation program, because it enables us to rapidly shift to renewable energy in our residences and in our small commercial buildings. We also know that community choice aggregation will support our energy efficiency programming, which is also critical to meeting our climate action goals. So a little bit of a deeper dive into our renewable energy strategies. Community choice aggregation is a critical piece to the puzzle of our renewable energy strategies, but it is part of a larger puzzle that includes investments by our Division of Power in power purchase agreements that support renewable energy development, and also with municipal building on-site projects. It also requires investment from our local businesses to support more renewable energy growth in the community. So we're very fortunate in the City of Columbus to have a Division of Power, to have two utilities that serve us through the distribution lines, our Division of Power and AEP Ohio, an investor-owned utility. Community choice aggregation will serve the folks that are served by AEP Ohio, residences and small commercial businesses. It's also important to note that division of power customers will not be served through the Community Choice Aggregation Program. And for that reason, the division of power has its own renewable energy plans to ensure that the division of power is in sync and in line with the goals that Councilmember Dorans mentioned early in this hearing. So with that, and with that overview, connecting community choice aggregation to our larger climate goals, I'll turn it over to Erin to speak more to our community choice aggregation program as a refresher and its timeline.
Great, thank you so much, Elena. And let me share my screen here. I'll get us down to the right slide here. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you again, Elena, for the great introduction and overview of what we'll be presenting and going over here today at the public hearing, as well as giving some context to how our aggregation initiative really fits into the city's overall climate and energy work. You know, this is really just one piece of the pie, and I think that that was really great to get some of that context, but it's a big one, and it's a really important one that's going to be very transformative for our whole community. And I certainly also wanted to echo the thanks to Councilmember Dorans and to Councilmember Remy for really convening us tonight for this important conversation. You know, it's really important to share as much information as we can with the public and with our community about this clean energy aggregation initiative. Certainly transparency and sharing information is something that's very important to the city. And, you know, I will be clear in saying we want to stand in stark contrast, frankly, to what we're seeing at the state around energy. So I'll just leave that at that. But this is definitely an initiative that can provide numerous community benefits and that we're very excited about. And we're excited to talk about some of those critical next steps that are going to help us meet those goals. So just like Elena was saying, and as Councilmember Dorans shared, we did have a public hearing earlier this year where we really went over some of the basics of aggregation. But still wanted to take a moment and just refresh folks on what aggregation really is and what it means. So there are three main components to energy and what makes up an energy bill. And those components are generation, transmission, and distribution. So aggregation is, which we have laid out here nicely and kind of a nice visual to help give folks an idea of what that really means. And so aggregation is really a process through which the city can pool its residents and small businesses together to contract for energy on the generation portion. So that's that portion where it all starts, where our energy is coming from. And by using group buying power, the city can provide competitive rates and provide more control over that energy source and where our energy is coming from. So the utility and distribution, or sometimes what we call the grid, that will always stay the same, and that means residents will continue to get the same service and benefits from AEP Ohio as they always have. So it's also important to remember that this program will always be voluntary, which means that residents can opt out at any time with no fees or penalties. So the city sees a lot of benefits, really many benefits in providing a clean, renewable electric aggregation program. I think perhaps most importantly, and what's really driving us, is it enables us to shift rapidly to renewable energy and is supporting the clean energy economy and workforce development in that space. It also allows the city to provide competitive rates for clean energy, and it expands choice for residents and their energy options, given again that the program will always be optional and voluntary. So it really is a win-win-win in terms of programming, and just makes complete sense for us to be pursuing. So I think what's most important tonight and what I wanted to share is just, you know, how we're going to get there and how we're going to meet that 100% renewable goal by 2022. So if you take a look at the timeline here, I am going to focus on the dark blue panels that get us through November of this year. Before June, the city did a public competitive RFP process to bring on a consultant to assist the city in all aspects of standing up an aggregation program. And so that's when Trebel Energy was selected and joined the city in late May, early June. And so one of the very first critical steps in this process as well was placing the issue on the November ballot. So the city really cannot move forward with implementing an opt-out aggregation program without that voter approval and without getting through that ballot component that will be happening this November. So on July 20th, the city passed legislation to place electric aggregation on the November ballot. Around that same time, and really just a little bit before in June, the city also released and began a public competitive RFQ process through the finance department to select a preferred supplier for our intended aggregation program. The city took this route really in order to seek to provide information to residents around just who would be providing the clean renewable energy that's powering our intended aggregation program. And it was through that RFQ process that the city was looking for ideas and characteristics that really signaled a supplier who demonstrated a commitment to partnership and creating not only a program that can meet our 100% renewable requirement that's sourced as locally as possible, but who also really understood the city's larger commitments and values around sustainability, equity, workforce development, and diversity and inclusion. Those were some values and characteristics that were really important to us when we were reviewing the proposals that were received. So the city received 4 responses to the RFQ, and a score team reviewed each proposal thoroughly, with the top score resulting in the selection of AEP Energy, which we were very excited to announce that just last week at a press conference, as was discussed a little bit earlier. So you'll hear from them in just a moment, but before I hand it over, I did want to touch on the formation of an aggregation advisory group that the city is putting together that will meet this September and October. This group will mostly be made up of stakeholders, external stakeholders, to discuss the processes, timelines, and policy for post-November implementation of the aggregation program. So it's really an opportunity for us to share out to the community and to our stakeholders about what they can expect in terms of the timelines and processes, but also to get very critical feedback to help us shape what that final aggregation program will look like. So we're still in the process of seating this group, but I do want to thank Councilmember Dorans for your planned participation. We're excited to have you as a member of that advisory group, and we're really looking forward to these meetings as a way to continue engagement with the community, and again, just receive more feedback on how we can design an equitable and impactful aggregation program that's really meaningful for our residents. So with that, I know, just like Elena was saying, I think we're mostly all here tonight to hear from our selected preferred supplier. Very happy to hand things over to Scott Swisher from AEP Energy.
All right, thank you, Erin. Let me as well get some slides here. Good. Screen mode. As Erin mentioned, my name is Scott Swisher. I'm with AEP Energy, and I'm the Chief Solutions Officer. I want to start off and really just express my appreciation and gratitude for having the opportunity to virtually meet with everybody tonight. I know it's our new reality. This opportunity is really important to us. Columbus is home for AEP. Employees like myself, my colleagues, we very much so value and put a lot of import, obviously, on our communities and where we live and have the benefit of working here as well. Columbus has been the corporate headquarters for AEP since 1983, and even much preceding that, Columbus Southern Power, now known as AEP Ohio, has been serving Columbus for over 100 years. So again, Columbus is home for us. We have over 3,500 AEP employees that are based in Columbus and dedicate thousands of hours of service each year to nonprofits in Columbus. And since 2002, AEP and AEP Foundation have made charitable donations totaling $289 million to local nonprofits. And again, the point here is not so much to ask for a pat on the back. as much as just we are deeply vested in the community, and we're really excited to work with the city on this. We'll lot to come, and there's a lot of things to figure out, but we're really excited to be a part of this team in the process. Who is AEP Energy? I know AEP has a lot of companies and names, and it can be confusing, so we thought it'd be worthwhile this evening to just spend a little bit of time with this. AEP Energy is a wholly owned subsidiary of American Electric Power, so that's the stock ticker, and we're an affiliate or sister company of AEP Ohio. AEP Energy is a part of AEP's competitive businesses, and we have a platform that includes renewables, behind-the-meter generation, wholesale, and retail energy supply. When we say competitive, what we mean by that is AEP Energy's customers all choose to be with us. We do not have a franchise territory or a monopoly. We are very regulated, but we're regulated in a different way than the traditional utility like AEP Ohio. We are a PUCO, Public Utility Commission of Ohio, certified competitive retail electricity and natural gas supplier. And we do not represent or act on behalf of AEP Ohio. We are completely separate organizations with completely separate leadership. AEP Energy serves over 500,000 customers in 27 utility service territories through a dedicated team of over 200 employees, 150 of which or more are based in Columbus, with offices at Easton, the Arena District in Chicago. We're very proud that our customer advocates are AEP employees. We do not outsource those services. They're great employees, and they're located in our Easton office. The map in the lower right gives you a sense of the footprint. Although we are a local company, we are proud of our competitiveness regionally and nationally. The blue areas are areas that we serve electricity or natural gas, wholesale or retail. And the dots that are too small to see or read are our locations of solar and wind projects across the U.S. from Vermont to Hawaii and from Texas or Florida to Minnesota. So we've got a broad footprint and experience with activities like are being contemplated here. We were really excited to see the RFQ. Although it was for our response, I think it did a great job of laying out the aspiration and the vision of the program that the city had. And so it really energized us to be creative and to kind of take off the blinders. So often these things are just simply a bid or a price, and it's a commodity. The city really showed a lot of creativity and spurred a lot of creativity and kind of an open-ended response in seeking new solutions. So we were very appreciative of that and the opportunity to contribute. We are early in this process, and I think Aaron and Elena mentioned there's a lot of input and feedback and direction that needs to be gathered. Like so many things in life, there are trade-offs, and we all need to work together to understand what we value and what matters most to us as we make those trade-offs. And we are thrilled to be the energy expert at the table to help with those evaluations, but we are going to do what the community wants us to do. That said, our initial thoughts, as we expressed in the RFQ, are as follows. We see an opportunity here to match on a one-for-one basis the electricity used in the community choice aggregation program, meaning the consumption by the residences and the businesses that choose to participate, offset with renewable energy. And there's three key aspects we see to that. One is additionality, which is the concept that what we're doing here is going to cause to come into existence new wind and solar. So carbon-free generation that's new. It's not existing or repurposed, or these are assets that are going to be built for purposes of serving this program. It's regional, as much as kind of renewable energy credits are great, and we'll talk through those in great length, I'm sure, in the coming weeks and months. It's important that the production is relatively close to where the load is. Otherwise, those environmental attributes really could be very distant. Could be in another state that doesn't have an impact on the local air quality, local quality of environment. So we're going to have the assets targeted for the state of Ohio with a preference for Central Ohio. And then cost competitive, we can't talk about energy and our economy and not also talk about cost. So we are capable of executing best-in-class power purchase agreements, meaning finding the lowest possible rates for the best available assets, and then linking those or making sure that those include, from a cradle-to-grave perspective, the project-specific renewable energy credits or attributes. And again, that's very important to make sure we fulfill the environmental vision of the program. So we see a one-for-one program that's built upon these three foundational principles. And again, these are flexible. They're things that we will gladly work with the stakeholders on in establishing what those relative trade-offs are between each of them. This would create a long-term pricing program. The term nature of this allows for these new facilities to come into existence. Wind and solar plants today last 40 years. And so those asset owners and investors need to know that there's good viability for the revenues from them. And so by giving them a program like this to work off of or benchmark off of, it allows them to have confidence to make those investments and drive these new assets. We need a program that's simple to administer. And in some ways, because this is asset-based, it is actually easier in some cases than market programs. It's flexible, that it can compete with the utilities' default rates, which are going to change from time to time with capacity markets and iterations with changes in rules, et cetera. So having flexibility is going to be really important for us in this long-term nature. We want to make sure we're competitive with options and alternatives. It will provide time for new construction. These are new assets. They're not going to appear overnight. And so we need to have some parameters in how we're going to manage that bridge from where we are to where we want to be. And it's really important that we don't allow for escalating costs to creep in. A lot of these PPAs have escalation clauses that, kind of it's the, do you want something now or do you want it later? And we want both. We want to make sure that we have a program that is long-term fixed flat pricing to allow us to really leverage the benefits of moving now. Aaron mentioned this, and I can't echo enough from AEP's perspective. Competition is all about choice. We earn our customers and we earn the right and the privilege to serve them continually every day. So as she mentioned, there's an ability here to exercise that choice at the ballot. There's an ability to opt out if someone doesn't want to participate. And even if for whatever reason they start to participate and then change their mind, they can leave at any time with no penalties. We want folks who want to be a part of this. And lastly, but I think really important, this program provides an ability to create funding for innovative city-administered sustainability and environmental justice programming. So again, blank slate, lots of opportunities. I think there's a lot of need, and it's going to be really exciting to hear the feedback that comes from everyone as we put this together. But we love the fact that this aggregation program can create the impetus or the motive to allow for long-term sustainable funding. We see this as having an enormous impact on our community and our state. Working through this could lead to over 700 megawatts of new installed wind and solar generation in the state of Ohio. That would directly create hundreds of construction jobs and dozens of permanent jobs, along with all the indirect jobs that provide project services and support. There will be the flow of millions of dollars of property taxes and landowner lease payments each year through Ohio's economy. And as with a lot of different areas, but specifically to power, electrons don't understand the rules. They just go between source and load. And so the more generation that we can have in the state of Ohio that's essentially zero cost, carbon-free generation is going to bring down the price of power in the wholesale markets for all Ohio residences and businesses. We'd much rather make our own power than import it from other states. As I mentioned at the onset, we are committed to collaboration. We're thrilled to be a part of this. We see so much here in the promise that it holds. We see this transformational initiative as very closely aligned with AEP's clean energy vision and our stated goals. We have a commitment to our customers for a brighter future, and we see that extending into our communities. We see this as an opportunity to create funding opportunities for new programs that can drive environmental equity and justice for all residents. And we're eager to listen and collaborate on many creative issues and items from many creative stakeholders that have been involved or will become involved in this process, as Aaron mentioned. We see this integration, this innovative aggregation, as a chance to realize the promise of diversity and inclusion with new opportunities, programs, and partnerships across our community. I want to close just by saying thank you. We really appreciate this opportunity. Again, we feel like we have a value to add here in our expertise, but at the same token, this is not an AEP program. This is a city program, and we're thrilled to be a partner in it. We're engaged and up for the challenge that this is going to present. We're eager to collaborate with all of you in bringing real and lasting benefits to current and future residents. As Elena was showing, we're still a growing city. And this clean energy community choice aggregation program can serve as an inspiring national model, not just local, for how communities can successfully combat climate change together. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Scott Belcastro with Trebel Energy.
Hi, good evening. This is Scott Belcastro at Trebel, and Again, thank you everybody for having me on this evening and hearing a little bit more about what we're involved in the Columbus aggregation. Trebel, just for a little background about us, we began in 2010, which this is our 10-year anniversary this month, so I'm pretty excited to still be here. You know, when I believe that today we may be the largest governmental aggregator behind the AEP Ohio utility, and we do operate in all the different utilities in the state of Ohio. And I believe too that we have the most communities here in Franklin County. So we're very familiar with the area. We love the concept of this 100% renewable energy here in Columbus, and are very excited to be a part of this and bring this to a reality. So Trebel's approach has been very consumer-centric. We've created a lot of processes that have benefited our communities tremendously. And we bring innovation and services and just general ideas to the table continuously to the benefit of the residences that we serve. And believe me, we always start with the resident or the people we're serving first, and the community leaders, and try to help them get where they need to go. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. See if I can do this, share content. And it doesn't look like I'm, there it goes. Excellent, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Wanted to just give everybody kind of a overall view of the timeline. And can everybody see the slideshow that we're doing? Is that correct? All right, thank you. So far, we're into the September, October, which is the campaign time frame. And if everything goes as planned and we do a good job, I think, of communicating the intent here, on November 3rd, we will be going out to vote for the concept of government aggregation. With a successful passage on November 3rd, then Trebel will be working with the city to do some of the processes that the PUCO governs and has us move through. And the first thing that we've got to look at is getting a plan of operation and governance approved by the city. And in order to do this plan of operation and governance, again, this will take place in November. We have to have 2 public meetings, and those first have to go in a newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks. They don't have to be in there every day for 2 consecutive weeks, but they do have to be in there for 2 consecutive weeks. And after which point, then we would approve the plan. These are public meetings to discuss the plan of operation and governance. And for those of you who are like, oh, well, what is this plan of operation and governance? Well, it is a general document that is created on behalf of the city that lays out the structure of the program. And I mean, truly, it is a general terms and conditions of how the program will be run. In order for us to make changes to this document later, it becomes kind of tedious in that you've got to have 2 more public meetings and move through that process to have council reapprove it. So in a more general sense, we will be trying to get the plan of operation written broadly enough to not have to change it every month, but at the same time, detailed enough that if somebody needed to know something about the program, they could indeed refer to the document. So at the 2 public meetings, we will be conducting those, Trebel, and you'll be able to have some input on that. And once those 2 meetings are over, we will bring that plan to the council for which they will approve the plan. Now that the city has a plan of operation in place, we would then have the city sign the application to become a governmental aggregator with the Public Utilities of Ohio. This application is submitted in a package along with the plan of operation governance that we discussed. And there's a mandatory 30-day wait period. And so we take all the information, we submit it to the PCO, and then we wait 30 days. In the meantime, Trebel, working with AEP Energy, have begun the process of creating a management service agreement. And it's based loosely or tightly, I guess, however you want to look at that. The beginning document was the Memorandum of Understanding, which will be transformed into this management service agreement, known to us as the MSA. We are going to begin working on this document, and once the voters have approved the initiative, we will then, in November and December, really dig into the details, the final details, I should say, of the management service agreement with AEP Energy. Once we've got input from the community, the stakeholders, the city, the council, everybody, AEP's input, what we can accomplish together as a group, we will then have the council approve this. So November, December, we'll be working on creating the document, the MSA. It'll be legally reviewed probably in December, and likely in January of 2021, or potentially if there were some delays, obviously due to the holiday seasons in there. If this moved into February, that agreement would be approved by council. We certainly hope that we can get that completed by those dates. So if you're out there and you're a resident saying, I'm all on board, I love the idea, I love the concept, I'm excited to have it, I want my renewable energy in my home, when's it going to start? Tell me how this works. Well, in roughly April, we will be filing, this is again, more PUCO rules and regulations that we have to follow. We'll be filing our letters that these are called opt-out letters. They outline the program, final details, the rate, the term, the termination fee, which will end up being 0, and other details, and how to opt in, or pardon me, and it'll also give you instructions on how to opt out of the program if you choose not to want to participate. Remember, everybody, this is something it's your choice. It's giving you another option to look at a program that you might not have otherwise had. And in this case, it's going to be competitive energy that's 100% renewable, which is a fantastic move. I think that a lot more communities are moving towards. The letters that we will be sending out that we've placed and docketed with the PUCO will be sent to your homes and businesses, small businesses generally, sometime in May, April, May, at which point you'll have 21 days to review the information and decide, hey, this works for me or it doesn't work for me. And if you do like it, you don't have to do anything. You just simply take no action and you will be automatically enrolled. And if you're somebody who wants out of the program, you'll likely be able to do it in a number of different ways to be able to opt out, whether it be phone, mail, or some other format. Once that 21 days expires, we send the list over to AEP Ohio, and AEP Ohio prepares for making the switch, all of you, small businesses and residents, to the new program on the new renewable 100% clean energy. And that should be flowing to your home in roughly, we're hoping to hit the mark of June. And so you will see that new program, the Columbus Choice Program, show up on your new bill through AEP Energy starting in July. It'll be on your billing statement, likely in July for most of you. That concludes everything about the steps and I'm happy to answer more questions in a little bit later on what other steps we will be taking. So I'm going to hand it back, I believe, to the council members.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate everyone's presentations tonight. I know I've got a couple of questions for folks that have presented here, and I'm going to try and do my best to direct it to the best person, but we'll obviously, we've got a number of experts on here, and if it's more appropriate to send it to someone else, just let us know. But I would like to offer the first round of questions to my colleague, Councilmember Remy.
All right, thank you very much. I just was reviewing, a really good study came out this week, and one of the things I'm really excited about aggregation is the opportunity for the expansion of renewable energy and the opportunity for jobs within the state. And of course, we want as many of those jobs in Central Ohio and specifically in Columbus. But the Ohio University Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs and the Utility Scale Solar Energy Coalition released a study, the first of its kind, this week in regards to if they were to create 7.5 gigawatts worth of solar deployment, and that would cover 1.5 million Ohio homes, 54,113 one-time construction jobs, and 618 annual operations and management maintenance jobs. $9.6 billion worth of economic impact during construction, and $6.4 billion over the life of the project. This is exciting, obviously. And so as we think about, and obviously this is just the solar impact of it, but we know that I think AEP Energy has stated that they would invest $1 billion in clean energy in Ohio to support just this aggregation program. So based on that study, and of course that commitment by AEP Energy to invest in that and the thousands of jobs that it'll create, we want to know, it's important for us. Will AEP Energy be willing to require any developer it works with on these programs to enter into project labor agreements with local labor unions to ensure that the jobs that are created will be well-paying, and they'll provide good health care and retirement benefits?
This is Scott. I'll take a crack at that. A couple things, and maybe just to start off with one point of clarification. So this program will drive that investment that you mentioned, $1 billion. We as AEP Energy may or may not, in fact, would likely not be the actual investor in the projects. And the rationale there is that we want to get the best possible price. And in many cases, there are developers and or institutional investors who may have a cheaper cost of capital than we do, or better project sites than we do. So we are going to work with everyone to get the best possible pricing that meets our constraints, as we talked about regionality, additionality, and the cost. So just to clarify that. In terms of covenants or requirements on developers, everything and anything is possible. Again, we just need to make sure we've made good trade-offs in those decisions. There are a couple features in the Ohio renewable community that are really great from a policy perspective. One of which is that the property tax treatment for these assets is covered under a Ohio Revised Code, roughly, or appropriately named pilots, or payment in lieu of traditional tax. And that provision requires that for any new solar, there has to be 80% local or residents of Ohio employment, and wind projects are required for at least 50%. And if you don't meet those thresholds and prove them, you are not eligible for that treatment, which is enormous when you think about the tax burdens over 40 years for an asset that produces intermittently. So that's kind of the first element that I think is important as it relates to kind of local economy and driving these. Secondly, these are good jobs. I mean, I think when you think about the types of work here, and you did a great job of outlining both the field work as well as office work and service and maintenance, and the pieces and parts of these systems require servicing, and oftentimes that can't be done anywhere than where that equipment is. And so it's a long-term employer in keeping these systems up and running and producing energy. In terms of specific requirements, again, we're open. We just have to be smart about that with all of us in terms of any constraints we put on a developer, investor, et cetera, may or may not have cost implications. In some case, it might not be a big deal at all. So we would work with the team in collaboration to deciding what our requirements are.
Thanks, Scott.
Sure.
In fact, that payment in lieu of taxes, I'm glad you outlined that a little bit, because that study did talk about, obviously on the scale of 7.5 gigawatts, but it would generate annual revenues of $67.5 million, equating to about $2.7 billion over the life of the project, benefiting counties, schools, and local governments, and entities like health systems, EMS, and fire. So, do we have a skilled, educated workforce to construct these solar arrays and the wind farms that will power our city? And if we don't, how do we get ourselves prepared for employment in that sector? I know, for instance, like from the union standpoint, IBEW's taken a leadership role in this. But in your opinion, what do we find as far as local workforce is concerned?
Yeah, Ohio is blessed with a long industrial history, and that's really provided for a lot of skilled craft and trade in the state, as well as the apprenticeship programs and the development of those trades. So, depending on the timing and the scale and the ramp, obviously, things are better with they're spread out, versus all at once. As you mentioned, almost 7,000 gigawatts, but our experience as AEP has been that we're in a good state to get these types of projects done within state labor. But I do think, the point you raise is how do we all create pathways to these types of opportunities and jobs? And I think that's one of the areas that gets really exciting about, we talk about programming or educational opportunities around this aggregation. So I think we're in good shape. However, could we be better? Could we do more to attract more people into that field and craft, which is clearly going to be a growing industry for the future? I think that's a challenge we should all take on.
Thank you, Rob. Councilmember Dorans. That's all.
Thanks, Councilmember Ruby. No need to be overly formal this evening. I've got a couple of questions. The first is for Aaron Beck. So the language that the City of Columbus sent to the Board of Elections originally included wording that included to support local energy generation, energy savings, and Columbus sustainable economy. I know we've had a little bit of back and forth with the Secretary of State's office and the Board of Elections about final ballot language. And I know the reason I bring this up is that I know a lot of the advocates for community choice aggregation has been very clear. And I think we've all been very clear about what the intentions of the city is in order to get to that renewable energy, 100% renewable energy by 2022. That said, the ballot language itself, I think, speaks a lot toward what our intentions are as a city as well. And I know we've had some back and forth about what eventually that ballot language will be. And since we read that at City Council when we moved to put this on the ballot, and this is an issue that's cropped up, I wanted to give an opportunity to you this evening to speak to a little bit about that ballot language itself.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to revisit that and kind of clarify and make sure everyone knows that, we did finalize that ballot language. To your point, it was passed at City Council on the 20th. It then has to go to the Board of Elections and get approved by the Secretary of State's office. Just as you were saying, we wanted to make it very clear to our residents what the intention of this aggregation program is. And that's why we chose to add additional language into the ballot language. So there's kind of some form language that the Secretary of State's office typically uses, and that, to our knowledge, all of the communities in Ohio have used thus far. But we wanted to take that extra step and worked with stakeholders and partners to get there to say, let's add some additional language in there that really commits our community to making sure that this program is in it for the long term around local clean energy generation, and to your point around energy savings and efficiency, and is geared toward really supporting Columbus's sustainable economy. So we did get that all certified and ready to go, all through the Secretary of State's office. So that is the language that will be appearing on the ballot. So we do have incorporated into that ballot language that it will support local clean energy generation, energy savings, and Columbus's sustainable economy, and that it's for that purpose that we're looking to enter into, these aggregation contracts. So.
Thanks, Aaron, for providing that clarification.
Certainly.
I have a question for Elena. I think, everyone has talked a little bit about this around sort of the community grant aspects of designing the program. And I know we've talked a lot about sort of, I think Scott's talking about there's sort of the whole, everything is open right now. It's sort of like a canvas we're waiting to sort of paint on right now. But as someone who's spent a lot of time at the city thinking about how a program like this from a community standpoint, which I know at the last hearing, we talked a lot about equity and what that means to the city. And I know that's something that within the sustainability office's front and center. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, from your vantage point, from the sustainability office, what that means to the city as we begin to sort of design the program and frankly begin to engage sort of outside partners. I think we've got a number of folks tonight that are going to give us ideas and what they would like to see. And I think it'd be a great opportunity for you to sort of level set from a city standpoint, how sort of we're approaching reviewing those kinds of proposals.
Thank you, Councilmember Dorans. And as Erin mentioned in her remarks, we have a real commitment as the Sustainable Columbus and the Office of Sustainability to center all of our programming at the nexus of climate and equity. And you do that through stakeholder engagement, which is why we will be putting together and are working on putting together our aggregation advisory committee, because we want to hear first and foremost from our community stakeholders the prioritization that they feel is appropriate as we look to what sustainability initiatives may be able to be supported through the aggregation program. We also are lucky to be able to draw from data. In 2017, MORPC put together the Franklin County Energy Study, which gives us the first of its kind glimpse into how energy is used in Franklin County and where energy comes from. It also, for the first time, gave us a sense of where the greatest energy burden in our communities lies, or in our neighborhoods lies. And so that is also a source as we look to, again, it's a multi-layered approach. We're going to look to our stakeholders to really guide us in what they think is most appropriate to deploy in their neighborhoods. We're going to look at the data, and we're going to try to put together a program that really centers on equity, because we know in our opportunity neighborhoods, they're disproportionately affected by climate change. But just as Scott mentioned, the goal here is to be very open at this point so that we can hear from community members before we set in place exactly what our programming is going to look like.
Thanks, Elena. I appreciate that. I think this next question is for, I apologize, for one of the Scotts. We'll see who's best equipped to answer this. But so when we look at the program getting off the ground in 2021, and obviously our goal to be 100% renewable by 2022, can one of you talk a little bit more about what year one of this program looks like versus year 3 or 4 or 5, as far as like our ability to develop those renewable resources here locally in order to meet that generation, but also how we go about getting to 100% renewable while we may not have hundreds of megawatts out of the ground by 2022 or 2023. Because I think one of the things, as I've heard from folks in the community, is that there's a little bit of confusion about, as we've talked about, sort of a very long-term strategy for bringing a lot of these projects to fruition. And I think, Scott, you did a good job talking about you don't want to do all of these at once because you've got workforce issues to deal with. You've got PUCO issues to deal with. You have power siting board issues to deal with in order to make sure all these projects are lined up appropriately. So I wondered if you could take maybe a moment to talk about, from a process standpoint, from say year 1 to 3 to 5, about how this sort of gets off the ground as we move towards 100% renewable, and then renewable that's generated here locally.
Yeah, great question. And as I think, fortunately with energy, there's always choices and options. And so we've got a number there. In terms of the spectrum, I think we can start as early as we'd like with some level of procured renewable energy attributes, or REC. And whatever we all decide is the right level of rec, will be where we start. And what I mean by that is, is that a nationally sourced rec? Is it something that's more regionally specific? Is it technology specific or asset class? So there's a pretty vibrant market out there and secondary market, and we can choose that. Now, again, as we talked about long term, I don't think any of us are going to be satisfied that really makes a long-term difference. I mean, you could argue because we're buying RECs, we're going to drive the market for RECs up. But again, in terms of really tying that back to jobs and local impacts and kind of virtuous cycles of economic activity, it's a bit of a stretch. So in terms of the specific timing, I think that is to be determined. In terms of general timing, a lot of the projects that we're talking about, if we take the actions and the timeframes that Aaron and Scott have laid out tonight, we would be in a position to see these assets start to come online sometime in late 21, 22, 23. And there's no reason we can't feather in or layer in, these differing attributes until we reach our ultimate vision, which is 100%, local regional generation. And I certainly think when you talk about, 2024, that is a very, very doable proposition by that time frame, subject to pandemics, regulatory changes, et cetera. But within the things that we all can control, that's a very reasonable time frame that you set forth.
Thanks, Scott. I think one question I know I've been asked sort of repeatedly by folks in the community when I've been at area commission meetings and otherwise is, what does this do for price? Obviously, I think one of our central focuses of this effort is to focus on the environment, to focus on the economy as well. But at the end of the day, folks want a competitive rate that fits their budget, fits their lifestyle. So Scott, I was wondering if you could speak to how we go about, and I know you mentioned this earlier about the sort of the trade-offs as things go, but I wonder if you could speak a little bit towards how we build a program that has a competitive rate sort of at its center.
Right. I think this is going to be one of the involved conversations we have. It really is, if we think about a triangle or maybe even a square of our different objectives and how each of those tug and pull on one another. In terms of price, I think one thing that's really important for everyone just to recognize is we are at a really opportune time for the industry. And I think as Councilman had mentioned, the economics have come to be in their own. So if you were building new generation today, renewables, hands down, is the cheapest incremental source for new generation. The challenge is you've got to compete in a market with existing generation, not just new. But those prices are really competitive. And again, I know, talking about forward markets and energy, we're going to get, really deep quickly. But I rest assured, I guess, if you were to take the forward energy market in our region and you compared that to where we're able to secure these best-in-class PPAs, very, very comparable, very comparable. The issue is once you've committed to that and made that purchase, you now are barely on an asset-based source or supply. And so you've effectively kind of left the market, meaning you're not subject to the ups and downs. You're not subject to the shortages. And, energy is really good like the weather in Ohio in that if you don't like it, just wait a little bit and it'll change. And with what we're contemplating, what we're really establishing is a long-term stable program that's asset-backed. And so we're decoupled from the vagaries of natural gas pricing or coal or any other fuel input because essentially we've bought fixed price, non-escalating long-term power. And I realize I'm not hitting square on your question, but it's nuanced in its answer. When a customer chooses to stay with the default service, there's a process that AEP Ohio undertakes. It's very transparent, above board, but it's a wholesale market price dictated by the wholesale market. And that's going to change based on the market conditions at the time. Likewise, and we have customers who buy from us directly on short-term contracts. Those are market-based contracts subject to the market at the time. And what we're really proposing here is a much more visionary approach, I think, in conjunction with you all, to where effectively we are causing to come into existence this portfolio of assets, which is essentially dedicated, to the service of the residents.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you getting into the weeds without getting too deep there. I certainly learned a little bit more about sort of that push and pull as you talk about sort of those commodity markets versus the short term versus I think what the city wants to plan for is very much the long term. And I think to your point about how we establish that stability of that generation, that you don't have to be worried about how much natural gas or how much coal costs, in which once the solar panel has been paid for, once the windmill is there, there's not, while there's ongoing maintenance costs there's not the commodity that you've got to bring there to make the generation happen, which I think is something, as folks think about how this works, I think is an incredibly important point for folks to understand who've been, used to prices fluctuating based on what's going on in the commodity market. So I think that's a really important point as we talk about price, but how this works down the line for folks into this program. So I appreciate you laying that out for us tonight.
No worries. I'm glad to do it.
That's all the questions I have for the panel this evening. I appreciate Chair Remy with you asking your questions as well. Wanted to move to open the floor to members of the public who've signed up via WebEx to speak this evening. We have 8 public speakers who have registered. I'm going to call upon them in the order that their requests were received by my office today. As I said earlier, but before we started the meeting, we'll try and keep this to 3 minutes, but try to be Midwestern polite. So if you hear the buzzer go, we'll try and let you finish your point. So with that, also if folks have a specific question for anyone on the panel this evening, you're welcome to ask that. I may sort of direct that to somebody to play a little bit of MC here to make sure that we keep things moving. But with that, I want to open it up to our first speaker. And if they could state their name and any organization they represent, and again, try and keep it to 3 minutes. Our first speaker this evening is Patrick Deering. Patrick, you with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Excellent. Patrick, go ahead.
All right, so yeah, it's Pat Deering, and I'm here tonight in my capacity as the Vice President of the Stonewall Democrats of Central Ohio, who last night endorsed this ballot issue for this coming November's election. And, the organization is primarily an organization that represents the concerns of LGBTQ plus members of the Columbus and Franklin County communities. But we do see this particular issue as intersectional to our community, largely because outside of the white gay male population, LGBTQ people in Ohio tend to be disproportionately impoverished, and because of that, disproportionately impacted by pollution, low air quality, and poor quality of life that stems from that. And Columbus is no exception to that. As recently as 2018, Columbus was deemed to be non-attainable or non-attained for the EPA's air quality measures and indexes. So it's something that we are deeply concerned about because it negatively impacts, in particular, our poor communities, and these are communities that our members do live in. So we are very excited to see this particular issue coming forward. We're excited to hear about its focus on improving the quality of life in the city of Columbus, and its focus on making sure that where we do make these energy investments, where we do build new generation and new distribution, that it's in areas where we'll be positively impacting underserved communities in the city. And finally, we do always just want to continue to push members of city council and people who work for the city, our city employees, to always keep green energy in the front of their minds and to keep quality of life concerns in the front of their minds. And I'm really glad that I saw Elena share her GHG inventories bar graph at the beginning of the hearing, because it did also include in there that never-ending uptick of the percentage that transportation contributes to energy use in Columbus. And we do know that Columbus, having a very lackluster public transportation system, is a city that does need to refocus its time on how we are mitigating the impacts of pollution from motor vehicles in the city. So thanks so much for having me this evening, and that's it.
Thank you very much for being here, Pat, tonight, and certainly you and the Stonewall Dem support of the ballot issue. Thanks for being here. Next, I have Jason Rayfeld from the Ohio Solar Coalition. Jason, you with us?
I'm here. Thank you.
Jason, take it away.
Good evening, Chairman Dorans, Chairman Remy. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on your second hearing of community choice aggregation. My name is Jason Rayfeld. I'm the Executive Director of the Utility Scale Solar Energy Coalition of Ohio, or USEC. USEC is a member-based trade organization representing utility scale solar developers, manufacturers, and industry leaders throughout the state. I want to first take a moment to applaud you on your effort to commit to providing 100% clean, renewable energy for Columbus residents and small businesses. I look forward to sharing how Ohio-based utility scale solar can be a part of helping you achieve your energy goals. Over the last 10 years, the cost of solar energy has declined by more than 70%, which has led to the aggressive pursuit of large solar projects by a variety of large energy consumers, including cities like Columbus all around the country. But Columbus stands out in its goal to procure this energy locally from Ohio. Ohio has always been an energy producing state, and today Ohio Solar presents a strong case to be a leader in Ohio's energy future. Last week, the Ohio Power Siting Board provided a glimpse into the current status of electric power generation in Ohio. The overview showed that solar generation was by far the most prominent fuel supply being developed in Ohio, with more than 15 gigawatts of solar and solar plus storage projects in the PJM interconnection queue. There are a lot of variables that contribute to Ohio's emerging position as a solar powerhouse. Of the most significant, more than 86% of corporations now have sustainability goals to reduce their carbon footprints, and most of them, like Columbus, are demanding clean, renewable energy sourced as local to their operations as they can get it. Facebook, Amazon, and Google are all building data centers right here in Ohio to support their growing demand as our state provides convenient access to major markets, and they are demanding clean energy to serve the corresponding increase in load. Commitments also represent the potential for a significant economic infusion into our state. In an effort to understand the economic impact this renewable energy demand could have on Ohio, USEC commissioned a study by the Ohio University that we just released earlier this week, and Councilman Remy mentioned, that shows compelling results detailing a significant increase in Ohio jobs and revenues to local communities. Ohio's utility scale solar industry has the potential to create more than $18 billion in economic activity, supporting tens of thousands of jobs. The economic benefits represented by the utility scale solar industry in Ohio are no longer a thing of the future that Ohioans need to continue waiting for. Earlier this year, in a historic moment for our state, the first utility scale solar project broke ground. 2 others have broken ground since then, and there are many other active projects currently pending before state regulators. And of course, workforce is a key component of utility scale solar success. In fact, the IBEW and Columbus Partnership participated in our press conference on Monday when we released the results of this report. USEC has partnered with the IBEW to help ensure that a well-trained technical workforce is available for all the utility scale solar construction jobs that will be needed. I've attached a copy of the Ohio University report and a fact sheet so you can review further at your own convenience. Utility scale solar will be a big part of energy development in Ohio, and it will serve as an economic engine that helps to attract new industry to our state and provide zero carbon clean energy for our citizens. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you being here tonight and sharing that testimony with us. And as a proud Bobcat, it's always nice to hear that Ohio University mentioned several times tonight. So appreciate you talking about that report issued by my alma mater. Chairman Remy, did you have any questions for Jason? Seeing none, I will move on to the next speaker we have this evening, which is Randy Lepla from the Ohio Environmental Council. Randy, you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Councilmember Remy and Dorans.
Take it away.
Thank you. So Chair Dorans, Chair Remy, and members of Columbus City Council, thanks for having me tonight. As I think I've mentioned before, OEC Action Fund's mission is to protect and enhance the environment and the health of all Ohio communities by advancing critical policy priorities. Thanks for allowing me to testify and provide best practices on community trace aggregation and to testify about why, with the right pieces in place, Issue 1's passage in November can be an enormous benefit for all Ohio residents. Community trace aggregation through Issue 1's passage really provides the city an opportunity to embrace clean energy in a way that ensures cleaner air, healthier climate, and good paying jobs while moving the city forward toward a more equitable future. A properly designed program will permit the city to provide competitive electric rates for Columbus citizens and small businesses and also support local renewable development. An innovatively designed program will do just that, plus develop robust efficiency programs, invest in opportunity neighborhoods, and lift up Central Ohio residents through requiring intentional hiring and livable wages. The city's effort to shift such a large amount of electricity usage toward clean renewable energy that focuses on project investment in our city's future comes at a really critical time. And the OEC Action Fund really urges the council and AEP Energy to follow the following recommendations and urges them to include them in program design and hope that these commitments will be publicly available prior to the vote in November. The first is 100% of aggregated electric loads sourced from newly built wind and solar projects in Ohio, with a preference for Central Ohio by 2022. A strong focus on building local clean energy projects from the outset of the aggregation program really ensures benefits for Columbus and all of Central Ohio. By reducing our carbon footprint locally, we'll see air quality improvements directly in our own community, and providing cleaner air to breathe for the poorest quality neighborhoods of Columbus, is something we should all strive for. The second item is renewable energy credits and making sure those are retired on behalf of the program, which AEP Energy mentioned in their presentation, to ensure additionality. Ensuring that new clean renewable projects come online as a result of the commitment will truly ensure that there's an impact to make sure that those retired RECs aren't purchased by another entity or city to claim their sustainability needs. So by retiring those RECs, Columbus will ensure that the new programs are adding to the demand for clean energy. The next piece we'd like to recommend is the community grants program be used for energy efficiency. This was included in the preferred supplier request and should be used to jumpstart the energy efficiency work through the city's Sustainable Steps program. This component of the program should create new rebate revenue programs to expand and improve efficiency programs. By creating this fund for this purpose, it would help ensure that the residents of the 6 Columbus neighborhoods who had home energy audits throughout 2019 and 2020 through the Sustainable Steps Community Energy Savers program are actually able to implement the recommended efficiency improvements in their home. Those creative options are available to encourage and support clean energy and energy efficiency for residents and small businesses through a CCA program, or yet another reason the OEC Action Fund is so excited to see Columbus move forward to aggregate its significant option. Sorry. The other piece we'd like to recommend is a community development fee. By adding a really small community development fee onto residents' bills, and we're talking like a penny per month, the city would be able to begin generating money for a fund that over time would build up and could be used for a variety of items important to the community, including community-wide efficiency investments, rebates for electric car charging stations, incentives for low-income customers to install solar, and more. We're also very interested in ensuring, as we've heard tonight from many folks, local workforce and development and hiring. We'd recommend all labor agreements entered into by AEP Energy and their partners would include minimum requirements for local hiring and requirements for workforce development in our community, prioritizing the opportunities for residents from those Sustainable Steps Community Energy Saver neighborhoods and opportunity zones. We'd also recommend that labor agreements be required to meet minimum standards for a livable wage, which I think Councilmember Dorans was referring to. We'd like to see increased local renewable generation because that means that our residents and businesses reap the benefits of the economic benefits of that solar, wind, and energy, and those that they can bring to the community. And it's an important part of ensuring that components included local workforce development. Investing in our community on this level will help bring expertise in the clean energy sector moving forward and ensure Columbus is reaping those economic benefits, as I mentioned. I also was referencing the new report that Jason Rayfeld had referenced from your alma mater, Councilmember Dorans, so I'll skip over that part, but it is really important to note that under an aggressive scenario of deploying 7.5 gigawatts of utility scale solar, the report found enormous economic development results and jobs on economic impacts and more, and I've detailed that in my testimony that I've submitted to you for you to take a look at. So as Columbus seeks to pass issue 1, we must keep in mind how to centralize those types of benefits for our residents. And leaning into renewables through this aggregation plan really requires local investment, local jobs, and workforce development to ensure the city is pushing all Columbus residents up together and shifting us toward clean energy. I know I'm getting close to my 3 minutes of time here, so I just wanted to thank you guys for holding a public hearing on this and providing the opportunity for input from the community. And just note that the OEC Action Fund urges the city and AEP Energy to consider the recommendations included here and to really lay those details of the program out as specifically as possible as part of the effort to ensure Columbus voters can confidently vote yes on the issue in November and put our city on a path toward a better, more sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I wanted to ask a follow-up question of Aaron based on some of Randy's testimony. So we've started this process as city, before before the ballot initiative is approved by the voters. And we've talked about at other hearings that gives us an opportunity to work with folks like AEP Energy to give us a head start on meeting what ultimately is our 2022 goal. One of the things that I certainly have heard from the community is about how, I think both Aaron, you and Elena had talked about that transparency piece that I think we all want to sort of keep at the front of this. And, as we're sort of talking about, what we're starting to commit towards, obviously there's only a couple months before the voters have an opportunity to weigh in on this one way or the other. I wanted to know if Aaron, you or Elena want to talk a little bit about how the city plans to continue to provide information to people within the community about what the program is expected to look like, so that a week from now, 2 weeks from now, we'll likely know more about what we're doing than we do today. But I think it's important for us to continue to sort of educate voters as they make a decision on supporting this ballot initiative or not. So I wonder if either one of you could take a moment about how from your vantage point the city plans to and wants to approach this sort of that transparency piece that Randy mentioned as we sort of get closer towards election day.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for, bringing that piece back up again. And just as Randy was saying, it really is going to be important for us to provide as much information to folks as possible. I do think it's a balancing act. We don't want to necessarily put anything out too far ahead that might confuse people. But I do know, like I said, we're going to be putting together that as a component, have access to and download. We've also had conversations about making sure, that even the proposal we received from AEP potentially is available to folks very publicly, so they can see that. At the end of the day, this is all public record. It's all public. It's all very transparent. We want to make sure folks have access to these documents so they can make informed decisions. And we also talked as well just today about, we're planning for several meetings that will happen before November, but we also want to stay open to continuing to have some of those important policy conversations into November as well. So, we want to stay open to, is it having another public hearing maybe where we're just going to discuss the community grant portion and making sure that we're really able to delve into that equity piece. And I know Councilmember Dorans, we've talked about this quite a bit and how important that is. But I think to Scott Flischer's point, there is a little bit of a push and pull there. So, really interested in hearing from, and I think Randy did a great job of giving some very clear examples of programs and policy that we could invest in with that community grant. So I think we're looking to hear more of that from residents and from our stakeholders of, what are those specific programs that you want to see, more robust investment in and that can have better impact for our neighborhoods. So, and I don't know if Elena wants to add anything to that, but.
I think the only thing that I would add, Aaron and Councilmember Dorans, is that, we know that to be successful on the broader scale, on the climate action scale, that it takes a community. It takes, our residents committed to energy efficiency. It takes our businesses committed to energy efficiency and renewable energy. And it takes, the city obviously, leading programs and leading by example. And so we know that it's everyone together that has to work on these things. And we know the only way we can rally the community is to be very transparent and give them ownership in this work and give them, the opportunity to really advise us. So that's the only thing that I would add.
Great. Thank you both. I also wanted to plug the website cleanenergycolumbus.com. That contains a lot of the information that we've talked about tonight. And I think that will likely be a good spot for us as more information comes out about the program for members of the public to stay engaged with as we sort of provide more details as we could get closer to the election date. So just want to make sure that folks are aware that that website existed, and I think that'll play into our ability to continue to update folks within the community. The next public speaker we have is Laura Ritchie from Root and Branch Inc. Laura, you with us?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Laura Ritchie. I'm the founder of Root and Branch, an organization focused on equitable development. Much of my work over the past few years has been specifically in the energy equity space, which brings me here tonight. I want to start by just thanking Councilmembers Dorans and Remy for hosting this hearing, and thank you to the city's team and AEP for sharing info on the aggregation effort so far. I'm definitely excited about the potential this could have for Columbus. Tonight, I'd like to use my time to speak specifically to the equity in this effort. Energy equity means more than just distributing the risks fairly. It also means equitably distributing the benefits. It's clear we all share a similar goal of creating equitable outcomes from this massive effort. But what I hope is also clear to all involved is that much of that will be determined in the next few months as the community program is designed and the contracts are settled with AEP. Randy just gave some excellent recommendations for programming and implementation. So first, I just want to co-sign on those. But tonight, I'm just going to add a couple additional recommendations that will be important to consider now as the contracts programming are finalized, because it'll be much harder to address after the fact. The first of those is definitions are important. What we deem equitable, what the environmental goals are, what the city deems local, etc., need defined and consistently shared with the community and contractors, so we're all working from the same page. And speaking of those definitions, these need to be more than just theory. These should be included in the legal contracts and required in subs contracts as well. To reach those specific goals, we need to spell out to all contractors, from the consultants to the campaigns to the supplier, how they are helping Columbus reach those goals, and also have enforceable ways to hold them to it. That part is important because based on discussions of aggregation, much of what Columbus wants to vote yes on is an aggregation that delivers lower prices, more jobs, economic development, carbon offsets. And keeping that in mind, some examples of things that should be explicitly outlined in the supplier contracts could include requiring aggregation demand be met with renewable energy, requiring demand be met with new facilities to ensure new jobs are being created, requiring the supplier to cooperate with the workforce development programming so that training graduates have employment opportunities in the big business that aggregation will create, and requiring facilities are sited within Columbus city limits. This program is catalyzed by Columbus ratepayers. While it's great that AEP will invest billions in Ohio, it's important that Columbus is seeing the benefits of that investment outside the walls of AEP's headquarters. Tonight, I've heard presenters speak on a few of these recommendations, and so I know some are already in the works, but they're important for each of us to keep at front of mind through this whole process so that we can feel confident about what we're voting yes on in November. I'm excited to see how aggregation comes together in the next few months, and I'm supportive of this effort. And I'm very hopeful that Columbus will meet the potential of this aggregation opportunity. So I look forward to being a supporter throughout. Thanks for giving me. Oh, perfect timing. So thanks for giving me.
Feel free to wrap up, Laura.
I was finished.
Oh, wow. Nicely done.
I know.
You're much better at that than I am. Thank you. Laura, I appreciate you being here tonight and your testimony and your ability to stay to 3 minutes. That is quite the skill.
Thanks.
Have a great night. Thanks again for being here. Next, we have Nolan Reitschilling. Nolan, are you with us?
Yes, good evening.
Take it away.
All right. As Councilmember Dorans said, my name is Nolan Reitschilling. I'm speaking tonight as a resident of Columbus. Want to thank Councilmembers Dorans and Remy for holding this hearing, and thank you, Elena and Aaron, for your continued leadership on the city's climate strategy. A number of the previous speakers, including Laura, who's a tough act to follow, touched on equity. So I just want to quickly add that I'm excited the city's forming a committee and a really clear process and timeline to have a deliberative community focus on equity through this plan. To be clear, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address climate and environmental justice. Just as importantly, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to give a voice to those that are often let out of discussions around climate change and energy. We can't afford to squander this moment. One aspect of environmental justice is energy poverty. And right now, our poorest neighbors are suffering. In the midst of a pandemic and an economic crisis, 6 neighborhoods of this city pay 2 to 3 times the national average amount of their household incomes on energy. As has been said previously, this is the third largest aggregation effort in the country and the largest in the Midwest. So I'm sure the city will have quite a bit of negotiating power. In light of the numerous crises we face as a community, I encourage the city to not just shoot for competitive rates, but guarantee that its citizens will save money from this effort. The ballot initiative does specifically mention energy savings, and the city should ensure we all see those savings. Together, we have the collective bargaining strength to do this. I also want to express my excitement and appreciation that one of our region's largest employers, AEP, is involved. You know, I understand they're supporting the campaign, Issue 1 campaign, by giving $1.5 million, at least that's what the dispatch said. Because of their long role in community service that was discussed, I want to encourage AEP to continue their great role as a community member and continue that same level of generosity in funding and supporting environmental justice projects, energy efficiency projects, and equitable renewable energy projects in the city of Columbus. I call that out specifically because we've seen statewide recently, the role that accepting utility money in campaigns can play in shaping decisions around energy policy. Let's make sure we use our resources in Columbus differently, ensure that our energy policy results in climate justice and cost savings for working people. With our leadership in Columbus, I'm confident we can do that. With that, I just want to ask a quick question. Councilmember Remy, and it could be for anyone. Councilmember Remy, I heard you mention the IBEW, and I know there have been a number of questions around the jobs that will be associated with this project. My question is, will the jobs associated with this project, will they be union jobs? And then if not, will they all pay a living wage?
Well, that's absolutely our hope. Thank you for that question. Absolutely, our hope is that most of these jobs will be directed towards union labor, and to ensure that the training is of superior quality, that the benefits that they receive are excellent, and of course the wages that they receive are living wage. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Nolan, do you have anything else?
Your time.
All right. Thanks, Nolan. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here tonight. Next, we have Connor Willis of Community Partners Energy. Connor, are you with us? Connor, can you hear me? Miss Angie, do you have Connor?
Yes, sir, we do. I have unmuted him, but I'm not getting a response.
Gotcha. Connor, can you hear us? I think I heard something. We're gonna try this one more time. Connor, are you there?
Yeah,
I can hear you slightly.
it seems he's trying to come through, but having some difficulty. We can come back to him if you prefer, sir.
Yeah, Connor, we'll leave you on the line and we'll try and get you at the end, okay? All right. Next we have Rachel Wagner from the Ready for 100 campaign. Rachel, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Wagner, and I volunteer with Ready for 100 Columbus. Today, I address the City of Columbus and AEP, since AEP's proposal was selected as the plan that will supply 100% renewable energy sources for most Columbus citizens through community choice aggregation. This is a tremendous business opportunity for AEP, and if aggregation passes as a ballot initiative, it will create a lot of demand for clean energy projects to be built locally. And I love that AEP intends to prioritize these new wind and solar developments. Our group, Ready for 100, is focused on equity like so many others who are here tonight, and in making sure that resources and opportunities are in place to help lift up people and communities. In AEP's proposal for the aggregation contract, they write about their ideas to support and empower the Columbus community. They say they could partner with groups like Impact Community Action and making collaborations with existing nonprofits and social services organizations sounds like a great idea. I would highly recommend continuing to prioritize energy efficiency. Really similar to what Randy was saying in her comments, I know that This is something that's needed. There's been a lot of goals that have been hit by sustainable steps. But I think that House Bill 6, that extremely corrupt bill that Ohio passed, has done away with some of the funding for this. So I'd say we need to make sure there's programs and funding for qualifying low-income renters and homeowners to get energy-efficient upgrades in appliances and home weatherization services in particular, and especially in Columbus's opportunity neighborhoods. Let's make some big goals for this. And let's also provide financial incentives for building owners and landlords to do energy efficiency upgrades, thus increasing the value of their properties and lowering the utility costs for tenants. I think the city's energy benchmarking initiatives address this in part, but I know the split incentive between landlords and renters is always tricky, and I think financial incentives would help. Perhaps something like a community development financial institution to provide loans is another option. I would not want these energy policies, however, to lead to rent increases and housing displacement. So I'd want to make sure the city considers inclusionary zoning policies and renter protections. And then I'd like to see grants available for social service-oriented buildings to have major insulation and energy efficiency upgrades. So St. Stephen's Community House is one example. And if we could fund these kinds of upgrades for all of Columbus's community houses, the next step for these buildings would be solar panel installations. In that line, schools could also upgrades. Yeah, I'm at the end of the 3 minutes. I'm almost at the end here, so I'll just make the note about schools also receiving upgrades like this. And then let's also make sure there is equitable access to job opportunities. And how about supporting clean energy job training for high school youth and adults? And that's all that I have. I attached in my written testimony a link to a document that was very helpful for me in coming together with these suggestions. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks for being with us tonight. Next I have Kathy Cohen-Becker, also from the Ready for 100 campaign. Kathy, you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Great. So thank you for the opportunity to testify about community choice aggregation in Columbus. My name is Kathy Cohen-Becker, and I'm chair of the Ready for 100 campaign in Ohio. Ready for 100 is a campaign of the Sierra Club to ask cities to commit to 100% renewable energy. Cities are responsible for 70% of carbon emissions, and Columbus is the 14th largest city in the 6th highest carbon emitting state. So our share of these emissions is significant. So our mission to lower carbon emissions is why Ready for 100 strongly supports aggregation in Columbus. In 2018, Columbus emitted about 6.3 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And aggregation for 100% renewable energy would lower these emissions by 1.2 million metric tons per year. So as Elena pointed out, addressing the climate crisis in Columbus will require a patchwork of many programs, but aggregation alone would lower our emissions by about 19%. But simply lowering carbon emissions is not enough. How we lower emissions in Columbus also matters. So Ready for 100 has 3 recommendations for how to move forward with aggregation. So first, we believe aggregation needs to prioritize building a local supply of renewable energy over purchasing renewable energy certificates. The electricity demand of more than 200,000 residents and businesses in Columbus amounts to about 1.7 million megawatt hours per year. And the city should use that demand to leverage construction of new local renewable energy projects in central Ohio. And these projects would create jobs in construction, manufacturing, and maintenance, as this study, which I didn't know about until this hearing, points out. Ready for 100's second recommendation is to emphasize equity and diversity. So the city's RFP asks utility bidders to explain how they would enable energy efficiency, sustainability, and affordable housing in 8 opportunity neighborhoods. And our ideas for how to do this include providing help for low-income homeowners to make energy upgrades, putting solar panels on all Columbus schools, providing grants for energy upgrades at community centers, especially the 7 settlement houses in Columbus, addressing the split incentive in which renters often pay high utility bills through either carrots or sticks to get the landlords to make the energy upgrades, and creating manufacturing hubs in opportunity neighborhoods for products such as sustainable insulation or manufacturing solar panels. So finally, Ready for 100 also recommends that the city and AEP examine innovative programs in other cities that have committed to 100% renewable energy. Examples include San Francisco's Go Solar SF program, which provides incentives to install solar panels. So through this program, residents and businesses have installed almost 5,000 solar systems in that city in 10 years. Atlanta has a Rounded Up program in which customers pay a little extra. Just finish up real quick. Customers pay a little extra on their energy bills with the money used to fund energy projects in low-income areas. And Cincinnati has a 2030 district, which is a network of high-performing buildings whose owners have pledged to cut energy, water, and transportation emissions in half by 2030. So thank you for your leadership in making Columbus a national model for how a major city can reduce carbon emissions, create jobs, invest in the community, while cleaning the air, improving public health, and addressing the twin crises of inequality and climate change.
Thank you, Kathy, for being here this evening and being a great advocate as always. Want to go back and see if we're able to get Connor Willis with us. Connor, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is that better?
I can. Yeah, you sound great. Feel free to go ahead.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak here, Councilman Dorans, Councilman Remy, and pulling this together. My name is Connor Willis. I'm a project manager with Community Renewable Energy here in Columbus. We're focused on developing solar for nonprofits and affordable housing developers, really to support and advance their mission. Equity, it's been central throughout this conversation and throughout the hearing tonight. There's several components to equity and how we get equitable solutions. That includes the program design and how we design that. It includes the labor contracts and how we negotiate those. But I just want to talk about the price of electricity because the cost savings here are really central to the equity conversation. And we really have two factors at play that we ought to think about. The first, as Scott Slisher from AEP mentioned, it is cost competitive now to build new renewable solar. That cost has come down 70, maybe 80% over the last 10 years. But the other thing is that utility scale cost for solar is going to continue to go down over the next 5 years. So as we are ramping up production of new solar systems here in Ohio, we should be expecting to pay a lower amounts. We have the collective bargaining power of the city and the third largest aggregation effort in the country. So when we layer those two things together, we really should be expecting cost savings and significant cost savings both now and moving forward. And that is what is indicated by the ballot language. So really, I just have a couple of questions for the city, for AEP and the team as it relates to price. The first is, when will we know whether or not the price for this product will increase, will stay the same, or will it decrease? B, are we going to know that before we vote on it? And then C, do we have contracts or mechanisms in place within the contract to not just be cost effective, but to maximize cost savings? Because if we're talking about equity in the midst of one of the worst economic crises in the last 100 years, maximizing those savings is really important. So I appreciate the time and the guidance here from the team, and looking forward to some answers on that. Thank you, Councilman Dorans.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for being here. Wanted to see, I've got, unfortunately, some yellow triangles up, so I'm not seeing everyone right now. But wanted to ask the question sort of on the price aspect. When in the process of the timeline will folks really have a drill down of, from a kilowatt hour perspective, this is the expected price? And I don't know if Aaron or Scott, whether or not either one of you could handle that one. I think it's more of a timeline question, and when we'll know that.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely speak to that a little bit, and I may throw it to Scott Belcastro just to confirm all of this. But my understanding is we would not be able to provide any of those firm numbers until we really have a firmly executed master supply agreement. And we can't enter that agreement until after November and until after the city becomes a certified aggregator with the PUCO. So I think we would be expecting to see all of those final numbers either later. It kind of depends on exactly when that all gets executed, but it would probably be the January timeframe, I believe.
This is Scott Del Castro. Yep. Scott Del Castro, Trebel here. And I'm going to just echo what Aaron said. It's exactly right. We would be looking to really dig into the MSA, shore up the numbers, really get an understanding of what the outputs that AEP can deliver and all the inputs from the city stakeholders and what we're trying to accomplish come together in that November, December. I would think that by January 1 of 2021, we will have more specifics that we can share with everybody. So again, I think Aaron has answered it absolutely correct.
And Scott, so I'm sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to jump in and kind of echo that I really appreciated the comments from, from Nolan and from Connor and from several of the speakers about the importance of the savings aspect, because I know for me, and I think we've talked about this, Councilmember Dorans, it's, when it comes to that equity piece, really a balancing act of what are all of those community benefits that we want to see coming out of it, the renewables, the clean energy, but also certainly balancing that with that final rate and what the cost is going to be. So I just appreciate folks drawing attention to that and, working with everyone to make sure we're getting as much as possible out of it. So.
And I would say, and Scott, about Castro, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong, but since Trebel has worked with a number of municipalities on energy aggregation, I would imagine if I get this wrong, you can correct me. But again, any municipality that goes through the aggregation process is not going to know the price beforehand, simply because you have to have the voters' approval before you're able to drill down to the level of designing that kind of program. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, that's correct. So typically we would take the community to the election. And, many years ago when I started in the aggregation business, people did ask, what is the rate? What's the rate in term we're voting on? And I would just tell you that that's not really what you're voting on. You're voting on the concept of aggregation and what it could potentially bring to the community. And so that's what you're really voting on, is this conceptual 100% clean renewable energy. And let me back up. It's 100% clean Ohio renewable energy for the city of Columbus. And it's a tremendous undertaking to deliver that. At the election, you're right, we go to the election. We know, and this, there's hundreds of these programs in Ohio. And typically, I would say 99% of the time, you do not know what the rate is. It's just conceptual. But once the people give us the permission, give your community leaders the permission to entertain this, then we would go out and look for and establish the rate. Just the same as we're doing here today, is we're going to not get ahead of ourselves. The first thing we need to do is educate the community. Be prepared for November 3rd. And then right after that, we're going to dig in really hard to figure out this program in the details.
And, just to underline it, I think another point that goes with this part of the conversation is that folks have the ability to opt out at any time, whether or not that's due to, cost savings or anything else. Folks within the community will certainly have the ability to make a decision one way or the other about whether or not they want to be within the aggregation pool or not. I think also Nolan or Connor had a question about, what is that, how do we, when we're looking at designing a program, look about sort of maximizing, cost savings for the consumer? And I think, Scott Slisher talked about this earlier about, everything we add to the program is a balancing act compared to what that does with the, with the actual rate that we end up paying. And I don't know if anyone wants to add a little bit more about sort of that that process. I know we've talked a little bit more about it tonight, but since we had a question about sort of maximizing that savings, I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that for a moment.
This is Scott. I don't have a lot to add. I think, obviously no one wants to impose higher costs on anyone. So I think it's important that that freedom of choice is prevalent all the time for all customers. And then again, I think, as this collaborative works together to establish the priorities, then we just need to keep in mind, what are you buying? And by being a member of the program, it's not just power, it's all these other things that so many, good ideas have come forward tonight. So, if it doesn't work for anyone because of their individual circumstances or preferences, not a problem. That said, in some ways, we talked a little bit prior about markets, but it's kind of the, stock picking or anything else. If your fixation is on the absolute low at any given point in time, there's always something better, if you will, than you're in a constant state of flux, and you're always looking for that next opportunity. And again, that's not to say you should be satisfied or lacking discipline in your choices or program design, but I think, again, this is a long-term plan and commitment, and it is that nature that allows it to be so powerful in terms of the impact of driving new assets and jobs and programs, et cetera. So I think hear the comments tonight, and expect to hear a lot more and a lot of discussion around this specific topic, because it is so paramount to what's going on. And again, hear the contributions loud and clear, and continue to welcome them and help us figure this out.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. That marks the end of the public comment portion of the hearing. I want to offer Councilmember Remy, if you have any closing remarks for this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Dorans. Of course, we want as many people to stay in as possible to help us achieve our sustainability goals. So we'll all be excited. And of course, the 2 public hearings that will come along after the voting is approved. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and thank everybody for their hard work to put this together today. With a commitment to 100% clean, renewable energy, electric aggregation for our residents and small businesses is foundational to our city's future. In order to meet these ambitious long-term goals, our community must now take on 2 major strategies when it comes to energy. We have to change the way we use it, and we have to change the way we consume it, becoming more conscious and efficient. And we have to change the way it's created and it's generated. That's exactly what electric aggregation provides our community the opportunity to do. To transition to clean, renewable sources of energy to power our homes and businesses, such a large transition and demand for local clean energy also means the creation of good-paying, clean energy Ohio jobs, expanding this clean energy sector across Ohio, but specifically here in Central Ohio and more importantly, the city of Columbus. Just last year, only 11% of electricity in Ohio was powered by wind and solar. We can do better. Through this initiative, we want to see that number grow exponentially and grow quickly. It's not going to happen overnight, but 100% clean energy aggregation will accelerate the transition and spur clean energy development. And as was mentioned earlier, to put this in perspective, it cannot be overstated that if we're successful in November, this will be the 3rd largest municipal aggregation in the country, and certainly the largest in Ohio and the Midwest. So that's why I couldn't be more excited to keep this initiative moving forward. And about about this particular hearing, I'd like to now thank everybody that was involved. Show my appreciation for Aaron Beck and Elena Shockey, our sustainable team, the Council Legislative Research Office, Matt Erickson and Nia Walters, my colleague Councilmember Dorans and his team, Kevin McCain and Hannah Miller, certainly my team, Jeffrey Carter and Lucy Frank, who couldn't be doing what I'm doing without them, and certainly our public speakers this evening. We appreciate those comments. Finally, the countless others working to make Columbus a cleaner, more sustainable community. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to hold this hearing this evening, and please remember to vote on November 3rd. Councilmember Dorans.
Thank you, Chair Remy. Appreciate you being here tonight and being a great partner in this work. Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments before we close things out to let folks go back to their evening. It is rare that we have the opportunity as a city to focus on an issue that fundamentally affects the environment, economic development, creating jobs for people within our community, and social and racial equity. It is, I think one of the speakers earlier tonight mentioned that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for the city of Columbus to be engaged in. And I truly agree with that and believe that when we think, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, we'll have the opportunity to look back and see what we've done for the environment, for economic development workers, and social and racial equity as it relates to energy within our community. I'm hopeful that what we design as a city and a community are going to meet the goals that we've laid out and truly go about changing our community for the better. That's why I'm so excited about community choice aggregation and what it means to the city of Columbus and what it means to our citizens. And I'm very excited for us to continue to move forward in this process, and certainly want to urge folks to continue to educate themselves on this topic. As I mentioned earlier, there's an informational website the city has released. That's cleanenergycolumbus.org. I think it's our goal and Sustainability's office goal as we develop more about what this program will look like. That will be sort of the landing spot for more of that information. But also want to echo the comments from Chair Remy to thank Aaron Beck, Elena Shockey, Scott Schlichler, Scott Belcastro for being here tonight. Certainly want to thank my team, Kevin McCain and Hannah Miller, for helping to put this on. CTV, the council clerk staff for helping to make sure that we could be here tonight virtually. And most importantly, members of the public who tuned in tonight and the folks who provided testimony. I'm very excited for our ability to work with so many experts within Columbus and Central Ohio on this program. And many of them were here with us tonight to make very specific recommendations about how we need to go about this. And as we've talked a number of times this evening, there's a push and pull as we think about cost savings, as we think about the environmental benefits, as we think about generation. But I think we're up to the task of figuring out how to do that and how to do it in a way, again, in which we're focused on those three pillars of the environment, economic development, and equality. So I think we're up to the task. I'm very excited for us to have Election Day come, and hopefully we can move forward with this campaign. So want to invite folks, if they have any follow-up questions from this hearing, they can contact me at 614-645-8201, or they can shoot me an email at radorans, D-O-R-A-N-S, @columbus.gov. And with that, this virtual hearing is adjourned. Have a great evening, everybody.